Would you be curious to know how you can make 30 to 40% on your money backed by real estate? Well, this episode is for you. Hey there, dreamers and doers. Welcome back to The Founder's Journey. I'm your host, Jonathan Killam. On this episode, I bring on Chris Cheff, who's in my network of real estate investors. Chris has a thriving business doing what is called gap funding. You'll get to learn all about Chris's story and how he went from being a struggling teacher to a successful entrepreneur. I don't want to give away too much because this is truly a great episode. Make sure you watch all the way to the end. Before we dive in, be sure to pulverize that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. If you find this content valuable, share it with other people that might find benefit, and give us a thumbs up as well. I'd love for you to leave some comments in the comment section. I always answer them personally. Your support helps us bring more quality content to you. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss out on what we have coming next. So go ahead and smash all those buttons, and let's keep the momentum going. Oh, and hey, as always, if you don't like my content, please feel free to hit the dislike button twice. All right, everybody. Welcome back to The Founder's Journey. Today, I'm here with my good friend, Chris Cheff. He is a Gator in our group, just like Doron was in the last episode. And he's doing some pretty awesome things that we're going to tell you about today. And I definitely love working with this guy, and he's definitely got my full backing. So I want you to hear about him and his story and his journey, where he's come from and where he's going. So, Chris, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, and let's take this away.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate you. Yeah, it's been just a whirlwind, I guess, up until this point. But yeah, where to start? I'm just coming up on a year right now in Gator. And so actually a year ago this time, I was pretty concerned about finances and the way things were going. And I've been kind of a serial entrepreneur, I guess, at this point, after I got out of my career, if you will. And so I had been teaching high school for about 18 years, and I was coaching wrestling and coaching football. And yeah, I wish I would have known about real estate investments prior to that. And I know to this day, if I would have, I probably would have never went to college. I get very envious of these kids these days that are finding out about all this stuff at 18, 20 years old. And I mean, what you could only do to be able to turn back that clock and have the opportunity that they currently have. But got to do with what you have right now. And so currently I've been, after I got out of coaching, I started officiating wrestling because what took me out of teaching, I should roll back on, is I took a job for the Department of Wildlife here in Las Vegas as their state archery education coordinator. And so I do a lot of hunting and fishing and outdoor activities, and that took me out of the coaching realm because I just didn't have time to do it anymore. So I wanted to stay involved in the sport, and so somebody had suggested officiating. So now I've been a referee, if you will, for the last 14 years. And so I do major high school events all over the country, and I do NCAA, and it's been a journey. But recently, it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess, because recently I blew out my knee in December, and it was right when things were amping up for me in the Gator space, and so it kept me off the mat from that point on, right in the middle of the season. But it was like that's why I say it's a double-edged sword, because it sucked, because that's a passion of mine, but at the same time, it gave me the time that I needed to concentrate on what I'm doing as far as trying to scale what I'm currently doing. and really focus, But like I was saying a year ago at this time, I mean, I was struggling. I had been trying the real estate game since 2015. And so I ended up going to some 3-hour seminar, some Robert Kiyosaki 3-hour seminar, and wholesaling, what's that? And that led me to getting involved in their program and trying things out, realizing that I overpaid for a bunch of education that I probably could have found on the internet, could have found on YouTube. And, but at least it got me started. It got me into it. And it was very difficult. I mean, I tried wholesaling. I did wholesale a few deals. And the very first one was the one that got me hooked on the whole concept. And it was through a lot of trial, because finding the leads was not easy, because the concept of wholesaling and whatnot it's a fairly easy concept, but the leads are the hardest thing to come by. And the one thing they fail to mention is that, well, you're going to be a lot more successful if you have thousands of dollars put towards marketing to get your leads. And definitely not as easy as they make it sound, I guess. But the very first deal that I had was, it was a unique and it was a fun story, but it kind of got me the bug for what I was doing. And this you got to understand, this came from a standpoint of what I first made in my very first year teaching. And granted, I had 2 kids, I had 2 toddlers, and I was married, and I was the only one bringing in income at the time. And so my very first teaching job paid $28,000, gross. And you try and support a family of 4 on that kind of money. But hey, that's what 4 years of college gets you, right? And so I came from that type of background. My dad was a teacher for 30 years. My sister taught for a lot of years. I had an uncle that was teaching for 30 years. And so it was just kind of, the thing to do, I guess. And at the same time, I loved wrestling and I loved coaching. So I wanted to stay in that sport, and that was one way to do it. I didn't know any better. And then I was introduced to the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so that was probably a book that really shifted my mindset. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so similar to my story. I didn't necessarily have the rich dad to fall back on, but I did have friends whose fathers were doing, entrepreneurial stuff. So it kind of reflected that way. So it was a very similar type of story. I had a baby boomer father who, he had a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit, but it didn't go exactly the way he had hoped. So he just stuck to teaching, but he worked his butt off. Because as a teacher, and anybody that's in here that's a teacher understands that if you're a teacher, you generally have 2 or 3 jobs you got to fall back on, because when summer hits, you're not getting paid, and you got to compensate your income or supplement your income. And so you're always doing something else. And I just grew up watching him just grind. And God bless him, and I love him to death because he provided the heck out of what we needed for our family. But at the same time, when I read that book, I'm sitting here going, man, that is so on point. A baby boomer father teaches you got to go to school, got to go get a degree, work for 40 years, and then you're going to make 40% of what you made for the rest of your life, and that's your retirement, and that's what you're facing. And so then fast forward to doing my first wholesale deal, and I'm still trying to remember how I got that lead. It was kind of by accident. It was through a cold call that led to another call, and it was just like a trickle effect. Ended up getting hold of a property management company, and I think it was on an ad from Craigslist. Saw the guy was wanting to rent the property, and I was doing some cold calling, and I found out he was an absentee owner. He was living in Washington. The house was here in Vegas. And so I approached him. He told me what the situation was. He's like, oh my gosh, this is like the 4th time I've had to repair the house, and I'm tired of it, I was like, well, have you ever thought about selling it? And he's like, well, I don't know. What are you thinking? And so I ran a price by him, and he's like, well, you'd have to talk to the property management company. They've got the keys. And I wanted to go check out the place. And he had just finished doing $14,000 worth of renovation. And I was asking him about the story. He's like, well, they said the tenant left in the middle of the night, and, he did some damage. So they had to, replace some flooring and but they didn't tell him the whole story. And so I go get the keys from the property management company, and they were a little bent, because he had to give them authorization to do it. And they were, you could tell they were a little stressed about, oh, are we going to lose a client here? And so they were tentative about, it was hard to get the keys from it, but I ended up getting the keys. So I go check out the place. And I'll always remember this. I parked in the driveway, got out of the car, and I just started walking towards the door. And then it hit me, the smell.
Oh,
It was right before I got to the door. I smelled it, and as soon as I opened the door, it was like a blast, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" It was just straight cat piss, and they had already renovated it. And what they had to do to renovate this place, they had to treat it like a flood. And this was 2 stories. They had to cut out 3 feet up on all the sheetrock, all the way up, just like it was flooded. They had to replace the flooring in the bottom, and which was on concrete, and then they replaced all the carpet up top, but they didn't replace the subflooring, which is usually CDX, and so it's wafer board, so it's going to absorb like a sponge. They didn't replace the baseboard. They didn't replace any cabinets that were wood, and all that stuff absorbs the heck out of moisture. And so even though they've done all that work, it still reeked of cat pee. And this is like in June or July. I think it was like in June. So you could only imagine what the Vegas heat was doing to all this. And the AC was not on in this place either. So it was just like, yeah, it was horrible. Anyway, and they were like, oh no, we took care of that problem. It should be fine. I'm like, when's the last time you went and saw it? I said, you must be just listening to your contractor who's like, oh yeah, everything's cool.
Oh, that's cool.
No, it's not cool.
So I got it under contract from the guy, and I thought I was getting a decent deal. I was like, okay, cool. I think I followed the MAO, calculations and stuff, and I got it under a good deal. And then I go and do that, and we were kind of freaking out about, oh my gosh, how are we going to push this to a seller when it smells like this? This is nuts. And so I'm in there like 2 or 3 nights in a row, enzymatic cleaners and bleach and wiping all the walls and everything I could, the cabinets, and I was like, okay, well, let's hope this enzymatic cleaner worked. And I did it like 2 or 3 times. And every time I came back, I'm like, oh my gosh, it didn't do a thing, because it's in the subfloor, it's in the subfloor, it's in the cabinets. I mean, you can't get it out. You got to replace that stuff. So I was like, man, I'm coming up against the clock on this contract. I need to just sell it. And so this is all within a week. And so I went ahead. I was like, screw it. I'm just going to put it out there on Craigslist or whatever and see what I can drum up. So I must have put it out at a pretty acceptable price, because I put it out on Craigslist, and I think within 2 hours I had like 60 calls. It was
wow.
Yeah, bam, bam, bam. I got blown up, and I had people just like trying to get to the house. They want to, they're trying to bid me up, and I'm like, well, I'm going after the first guy who's going to do something about it. And so I had a call from an acquisitionist that worked for a major fix and flipper here in town, and who was actually in the middle of scaling his business. And he's like, yeah, we want to see it right now. He said, I'll send a crew down there within the next 2 hours if we can get in. So I told him the code. They got in. They went and saw the place. He calls me back. He's like, we ran our numbers. It's looking good. Let me have my boss give you a call. Cool. So about 15 minutes later, 30 minutes later, his boss gives me a call. And this is what's so funny about the situation. The guy gives me a call, and he's in Fiji on his honeymoon. He'd just gotten married. And he's sitting there beating me up about the price. And he's like, dude, what's it going to take to get this place? We want this place. I'm like, well, it's at this price right now. I said, the EMD's $5,000, and, I said, whoever gives me the best offer. He's like, I will have that money wired to escrow within the next 20 minutes. And he said, we'll pay you $6,000 over your asking price. I'm like, cool. I said, as soon as that money hits, I said, it's yours. I'll sign it over to you. And so that's what happened is he wired the money to me. I had it. So I locked it up to him, met with his acquisition guy, and handed over the contract for the assignment fee. So I had to wait until they closed up the deal. And that was like within 2 days, we had it closed through escrow. But the funny thing is about this, what I found this out from the neighbors and from the contractors. I finally got a hold of the contractor. The neighbors had told me, they were like, oh yeah, we had always been complaining about these cats over this place. And granted, they had like a little kitty door in the back, built into the back wall. So like a small dog door. And I come to find out from the neighbors, they were like, "Oh yeah, animal control was over here about 2 weeks ago, and they went into that house and they captured like 65 cats.
Oh my.
They captured like 65 cats, and that was in the first go round. And then because I was kind of curious about it, because the first time I pulled up to the place, I didn't think anything of it. But there were a few cats like on the on the cinder block walls and stuff, and over at the neighbor's house, I'm like, hey man, there's a lot of cats in this neighborhood. I didn't think anything of it. And then they told me later on, about a week later, they were like, yeah, they've been back 2 more times. And I said, and then I talked to animal control. They were like, oh yeah, we've captured over 100 cats out of this area because of that house. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, well, that kind of makes sense with the way it smelled. So I could only imagine what it looked like inside that house. It was just like a giant litter box inside there, and so that was definitely reflective of that smell. But the whole thing is I ended up making $39,000 on my first wholesale deal.
Oh.
And so I apparently had it priced right and got, crazy offers, got it closed like that. And that was all within a week. And that's what kind of gave me the bug, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I just made, a teacher's salary in a week. I'm like, man, I got to really try and figure this game out. But again, I hit a block wall with the leads. It was hard to find the leads. Are they there? Yeah, of course they are, but it's challenging.
Hey guys, I just wanted to touch base on this topic right here. So as Chris is saying, wholesaling isn't easy, but the truth is most things worth doing are not easy. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because this is actually an area where I'm able to help people. So if you're interested in getting into wholesaling, I left my calendar link in the description below. Book some time with me, and I'd love to help you out and get you started. All right, back to it.
I tried my hand at trying to get involved in commercial, and I got myself involved in a couple big commercial deals. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. The sellers thought I was a broker, and I was like, no, I'm not a broker. They're like, oh, well, you're doing this and that and the other thing. I'm like, I'm not a broker. I'm just trying to liaison the deal, if you will, trying to connect the dots. Because I went in with the attitude of, these are big deals and they're out of my wheelhouse, but somebody has to sell them, somebody has to move them. So they were off market deals, and I was just trying to do what I could to bring a buyer to the table and try and, create a marketing fee agreement or a consultant fee or whatever you want to call it at the time. But now from what I know now, compared to what I was doing, I was sitting there going, wow, I was lucky I didn't get in trouble for some of the things that was going on, because I didn't know any better. I was just trying to make things happen. And I did a lease option deal. I did a fix and flip deal in Florida remotely. That was a mistake. I wouldn't really recommend it to anybody unless you have a known crew, a trustworthy crew on site, because that deal I ended up going through 4 different contractors, and then finally some random handyman actually ended up saving the day and doing the whole thing, fixing everybody's issues. But then I thought I was going to lose my butt on that thing, because ended up finding out that older homes in Florida, like 1960s homes, use lead piping for drains and stuff like that. And so there were roots perforating the piping. The sewer was starting to back up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they had to dig completely underneath the foundation, replace the whole thing as they were putting a new sewer system in that neighborhood. And I'm like, so I still had to pay for that, because every household in that neighborhood had to contribute a certain amount of money to the new sewer system. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? But luckily, by the grace of God, I got out of there making $1,200. So at least I was in the black and on the red. Lesson learned, though. So anyway, kicking things around. I got into Ron LeGrand's program. That he does a lot of lease option stuff. Great program, but there are certain things that could be applied to it now that I'm seeing that would be highly beneficial. But then I was doing a lot of searching online as far as YouTube and whatnot, and I was running into like Cody Sperber, and then I saw this guy with this peace sign on his hat, floating around once in a while, and I didn't know who he was, and but then I was watching as he was getting more and more, his presence was showing up more and more on YouTube. And then I ran into Jerry Norton, and I really liked him because I saw that he had a wrestling background, and yeah, we can be a little biased sometimes, but at least I knew he was a hard worker, and very disciplined. And then Pace just kept on popping up. And then I finally watched some of his stuff at length and realized the type of attitude of gratitude that he had, and how he was so always trying to help, always trying to help, always trying to help. And it's just the information that he was dropping for people for no cost, just on his YouTube channels, and the way he was, just so endearingly trying to help people. And that's what really caught me. I'm like, man, I love this. I just love the fact that he's always trying to help, always trying to help. But that comes from like a coaching aspect, from a teaching aspect, because I like to be able to help people as far as give them information, give them my knowledge that whatever I can attribute to their success, and watch them grow. And so, I get that part of it. And that's what I really appreciated about it. And just the fact that everything was positive. How to watch him grow to a point of where people would, bring him problems. They would present problems to him, how he would pause, think about the constructive criticism he could give to the deal, but then add the positive to it without making it a negative situation. And it was just so cool to me. And it just really reflected hard on me. And so that's why I wanted to dig in further. I saw the Sub 2 program, was kind of trying to learn a little bit more about it. Didn't know too much about that type of strategy, but then he launched the Gator program, and I watched him launch it the first time. He's like, well, we're going to do this limited time, then we're going to cut it off for 6-8 months. And I was like, oh man, I can't afford that right now, and so he cut it off and didn't hear about it for a long time. Then he launched it again, and he's like, oh, we're going to cut this thing off, and da-da-da. And I was like, hell, I still can't afford this, I don't even have it.
More expensive every time too.
Yeah, it was. And sure enough, he cut it off, So the third time come up, I'm like, hell. And I just recently got a corporate credit card, for my other company that I had. I'm like, I got to do this. I said, he said he's going to cut it off for a year, And so I went ahead and put it on the credit card.
Shut up and take my money.
And I didn't have time to deal with it at the time, but I wanted to make sure I did it before he cut it off. So I had to jump in because I think I joined like at the beginning of May or something like that, but I didn't have any time because with my officiating, I was gone like every weekend, and I could do it all throughout the year if I wanted to. But so once I had a big tournament at the end of June in Orlando, it was like a week-long tournament. I got back and I started going through the modules in first week of July. And that's when I was really starting to dig in a little bit, trying to figure out what I needed to do. And I just could not find these EMD deals. I couldn't find the transactional funding deals. Were they there? Yeah, they were there. There was just so much competition. It was hard to jump on those. And so I was scrambling and I got hungry. And basically what the biggest thing that just caused me to take action and to start doing stuff was I was just plumb tired of being broke. And literally last year at this time, I was trying to make certain things happen, but I was still like driving Uber to make things, make ends meet, to cover certain bills and do what I had to do to have a flexible income situation, just to make it make sense. And that sucks. Having to be in that position. But I was just hell bent on not going back to a W-2 situation, because once you get sucked into a W-2 situation, you're on their schedule, you're on their rules, and you don't have the ability to be an entrepreneur as much as you would like to, Can you? Yeah, but it's very, 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 very challenging, and I was hell bent on trying to not necessarily burn my ships, but, I wanted to make them semi-repairable, I guess, at that time. So I wasn't quite ready to sink them. But anyhow, so I had to try and figure out a way to come up with something I could push and something that I could do that I didn't have to just sit there on Facebook or try and create some kind of long-term relationship with the wholesaler to try and get some deals in when they don't know who the heck you are. Those relationships take time. But when I saw these deals disappearing, I was like, man, I got to figure this out. I got to come up with something that's going to have a better, a solid return, a shorter term deal. And I accidentally ran into my first lead through some gal randomly calling me. And she was just trying to sell me her house, actually in North Carolina. And it was in Charlotte. And she was trying to sell that so she could gain capital to invest in another fix and flip project she wanted that had to do with a couple of lots, and had 2 properties and 4 lots is what it was. And that deal ended up not working, but I got an idea of how to potentially make it a shorter term deal between talking to the contractor and the hard money lender that she had on the deal. And we were coming up with a way that we'd be able to get a couple of draws earlier to be able to cover the gap for the cash to close, to be able to get out of the deal, to be able to exit out of the deal sooner than the anticipated project length, because the project was going to take 4 to 6 months. And however, what we discussed, it looked like we could potentially be out of the deal within a month, with the first 2 draws, due to the amount of the cash to close. And I'm like, this could work. And I'm sitting there going, man, we can charge them. I think we were charging her like 25% at the time, or 20 or 25%. And we were going to be able to get out of the deal within a month. And I'm sitting here going, man, what's the difference between that and an EMD? I'm like, an EMD is going to take you 14 to 30 days at most times. And I'm like, getting a decent return. It's not these crazy high returns on some of these EMDs that some of these people are a little too far-fetched on. But at the same time, it's a higher acceptable return. So I'm like, hey, what's the difference? So I just started trying to develop situations like that. That deal didn't work out. However, this same hard money lender had brought me another deal that we ended up getting into, and created a shorter term deal, higher return. And, so we decided to jump into that and give it a shot. And that started working. However, I didn't realize some of the things, of course, that I know now, but there wasn't an education on that. There wasn't really guidance on that. Pace was still planning on launching that later, of course, because he had Gator 1 and 2, and that had to do mainly with EMDs, transactional funding. And what I was doing at the time was anticipated to be Gator 5.0, but which is now Gator 3.0, because he saw the need for, releasing some guidance and education on that sooner than later, because it's a highly attractive product that people go after because it's something that can be done. It's just a lot more risky, because now we're dealing with money that leaves escrow. And I didn't necessarily, understand that, I guess, at the time, the difference on the risk factor, nor certain other things to be aware of, right? And of course, I was doing things to the best of my ability and the best of my knowledge to try and maintain, try and keep people protected and make sure I was trying to do everything right. I was trying to bring on top tier TCs, and I was trying to follow, the gamut of the suggestions. However, then of course I learned, when you get into it, just because they go through the top tier TC course does not mean that they know what the hell they're doing. They need to have experience, period, and if they don't have experience, they need to have either some kind of mentor or some kind of guidance, to somebody to hold their hand to, make sure the right thing's being done. Because I have been in a couple deals, where if the TC would have known better, I wouldn't have lost my own personal money. And I'm still trying to recover from some of that stuff.
I am never going to financially recover from this.
But I can't put all the blame on them, because they did what they knew. They did what they knew best. I did what I knew best. I decided to get into the deal. I signed the paperwork. I wired my money, and here I sit, So now I'm sitting here going, damn, if just one little thing would have been different, I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in. But unfortunately, we're all learning as we go through this process. And some people, as myself as well, you find a deal, you get excited, you want to jump into a deal, and you might not have done all of the homework on it that you needed to. And lesson learned at this point. But I know everything that anybody does, hopefully, unless you're just a complete idiot, you learn from mistakes, and you don't do that again. So that's definitely where I'm at on, several different things.
All right, guys, I just wanted to butt in here one more time. So Chris is doing a good job of illustrating extreme ownership. This is something, as entrepreneurs and business owners, that we really need to pay attention to. Because if we don't take extreme ownership of the things that are going on around us and in our business, then there's no way for us to change it. Essentially, if you point the finger at everyone else, then all it's saying is that, you're not in control of your destiny. So I once heard Tom Bilyeu give a great example of what extreme ownership should look like. He once said that if his wife were hit by a meteor and died, that he would take ownership for that. He goes further into saying how He knows that there are satellites and people out there that are tracking what is called near-Earth objects. And he could have been donating to those particular institutions and paying closer attention to those things himself. But obviously those things are not important to him, and therefore he's not doing such a thing. So essentially what it comes down to, there is always something different that you could have done, and there is always something different that you can do. We have multiple different paths that we can take, and truthfully, the best we can all do is educate ourselves the best we can and take action. Nobody's ever going to have 100% of the answers. So if you got about 80% leading in the affirmative, then you should probably go ahead and pull the trigger and figure it out from there. Anyways, let's get back to it.
And, we've done a lot over the past year. Like I closed my very first deal on August 10th. So it hasn't even been a full year since I've closed my first deal. And, we've done, I think we're just over 60 deals, I believe, in the first year, which is great. I think it's okay. It's not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be more than that right now. Or I wanted to be further along than that, I should say. But it is what it is, mainly because I had to slow down. I've been working on scaling, and, we went through a process with Pace and Molly and Ashley to get an operator. And that was an interesting story. I don't know if you want me to talk about that at all, but that was a great opportunity that I had. And I was so glad that I had a chance to hike with Pace when he came over to Vegas in November. And I was just kind of in a bad way as far as with how busy I was, and realizing how much of a bind I was in on communication, because everybody that was coming into a deal, I was trying to let them know. I was like, yeah, we want, I'm going to keep you informed throughout the deal. We'll keep you updated. I want to make sure you're taken care of. I just wanted to do right by people, But the whole problem of you don't know what you don't know snuck up on me and hit me in the back of the head like a club, because I didn't realize at the time that I wasn't going to be able to keep up. Because once you get to a certain point of dealing with a certain amount of people that are, requesting your attention or wanting you to have that time to talk to them and call and whatnot, there's only so many hours in the day. And unfortunately, there's not enough hours in the day for me. And it got to a point where I couldn't answer my emails. I was getting buried in my emails, buried in my text, buried in my Facebook messages, still trying to call everybody, but I'd get to the end of every day, 8:30, 9 p.m. and I'm sitting there going, holy crap, I still got 10, 15 people I need to call, and I just did not have the time.
Have you guys implemented any AI yet?
We're working on it. Okay. We're just trying to find something that works how we need it to.
So after this, we should talk a little bit more about that. I might be able to help you out. There's something that I'm working on as well.
Okay.
I know I had referred you over to one that I was checking out, but I kind of switched gears, and I'm working on building something else right now. So I think it could be beneficial once I've got it complete. So I'm probably about 40% there, but it's definitely a good program.
Well, I'm game. I mean, I'm looking for anything that automates and gives time back, right? Buy back your time. But so once I figured that out, that it was such a problem, I heard Pace was going to be in town speaking at an event. I think it was at a Jerome Maldonado event. And he was going to be here speaking, and then he was going to go meet up with the Vegas Sub-2 Gator group, the whole community, and go on a hike in the morning. And I was in Iowa or St. Louis at the time or something like that. I was at a tournament, and I was going to fly back the night before he was going to be out there. We were supposed to meet at 6:30 in the morning out at Red Rock State Park and go hiking. And my flight didn't get in till 1 a.m. And so my flight got in at 1 a.m. And by the time I got home, showered and everything, I got to bed at like 3:30 or something like that. Took a nap, got up and headed out there. And I'm just so glad I did, because, and this is kind of kind of attributing to the fact that you need to try and go to every meetup you can, and especially if Pace is going to be there, or somebody major in the community, you never know what you're going to miss out on. And there's a ton of FOMO. Can we get to everything? No, but I would try and get to everything you can. Even if it's a local meetup that it doesn't even have to do with community, because you never know who you're going to meet and you never know what you're going to talk to that might be able to make a big difference in your business, or at least what you're doing. So through the hike and stuff, on the way back, we got to our destination. Pace talked a little bit about things. Then on our way back, I ended up hiking with him, by him, and we got to talking, and we ended up talking for about 45 minutes. And I told him how, things were going and the issues that I was having, because I was so desperate to get help on this. I just had to talk to him about it. I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do. I said, I cannot keep up. I said this and that and the other thing, just like I was talking about here. And he was like, you need a Molly.
We need Molly. Get Molly. Bring Molly.
I could just see him pausing and thinking about it. He's like, you need a Molly. I'm like, what does that mean? I didn't really know who Molly was at the time. I mean, she'd helped me on my very first deal, but I didn't know what all she did, for Pace. And so he explained a little bit more, and he's like, oh yeah, you need an operator, dude. He's like, you need to have help on this. I'm like, cool. What does that mean? And then he paused. You could see him thinking about things, and I don't know exactly what he was thinking, but in my mind, I'm sitting there going, I think he's realizing right now that there's people in this business that are going to scale to a point of running into the same issue, and that they're going to need help, And so he's like, tell you what, you need to shoot me a text right after this, or right now. He said, shoot me a text so it reminds me. He said, I'll get you on the phone with Molly. He said, I'll have Molly call you again, and I'll have Molly and Ashley help you. And Ashley is Molly's operator. And he said, I'll have them help you get an operator. I'm like, okay, cool. So we went on this venture. He's like, oh, well, and actually what he said, I want to plan a Zoom call with you, so we'll meet on Tuesday, and we'll get this ball rolling. We'll get this figured out. I'm like, okay, cool. So I thought it was going to be a Zoom with Pace, Molly, Ashley, and myself. And I didn't know about these family night Zooms and stuff. And so, yeah, so then this meeting pops up on the calendar. I'm like, I thought this was just supposed to be a meeting with us. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So I show up, but I didn't realize there was going to be 1,000 extra people on there as well. and he made an event out of it. And so I got a little bit nervous about it, but Pace, did his half-hour intro into everything, because he takes a minute to get to where he's going, of course, because he has so much to talk about all the time. But once he finally started talking about this, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to bring Chris up right now, because he had asked me too before. He was like, I need you to come up with a list of 15 things you need to take off your plate. I'm like, done. So I actually came to him with like 2 pages worth, and so then he brings me up on the call, and I lasted about 4 minutes before my computer decided to freeze up. So that sucked. That was the only time I've ever frozen on a Zoom, and it had to be right then at that time. I'm like, this is awesome. And so it froze up to a point where I actually had to restart my computer and come back up. And then by the time I came back up, people are like, oh, Chris is back on here, bring him up, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, sorry, brother, we've moved on already. I'm like, oh my gosh, this sucks. And the only reason I was distraught about it is because it's like, damn it, I need answers now. I mean, I was so desperate to get help. I was like, I need help. But then
know that feeling.
And then he had Molly continue to reach back out to me, and we did a series of Zooms, and they launched out to their community, the top tier TC community, what the issue was, what we were looking for. They sent out a series of questions to answer, and they had, I think she said out of 400 people, they had like 20 they had boiled it down to that had major interest. And then they narrowed it down according to their answers down to a top 3. We ended up interviewing those 3 people. And then we were right in the middle of deciding who to bring back for a second interview when Pace had asked me to be one of his presenters on that 12 Days of Christmas program, where there were 10 presenters. Pace did day 1 and day 12, and then there were 10 presenters in between. And so I made sure I was day 11 before the last day. And so I got on there, and we did a pre-recording for an hour talking about our story and what we're doing. And whatever value position we were trying to add at that time. And then we did like a live Q&A that night. And from that, having the inexperience that I didn't block off my calendar. I didn't realize what I was going to do. And I had a Calendly link and all that stuff available for people. But then my next 2 weeks were complete hell, because it was just like 8-9 meetings a day, just bam, 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 bam. And it was taking all my day. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get anything done? So I was trying to fit all those meetings in between, trying to get things done. That was, so it made my communication problems even worse. But I was kind of glad I didn't block it off, because if I would have blocked it off, I would have never ran into Brianna, who I have now, as my operator. So Bree and her husband, Russ, had recently got involved in the program. I guess Russ had joined Gator, and Brianna had joined Top Tier TC. And she said she was halfway through the program at the time. She was just going through the thing. But they came on there, and she was very exuberant about it. And she was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I heard your story. She's like, this is right up my alley. She said, I don't know if you've made a decision and you've already picked who you're planning on having, but if I could be considered, I would love the opportunity. And I'm like, oh, well, tell me more. And so she continued to tell me what her background was. And she'd recently moved within the last year to Nashville area, down about 20 minutes south of downtown Nashville in Thompson Station. And she'd moved out of Seattle. But what she had done over in Seattle, and it was funny too, because she'd already had a resume ready to go and everything. She sent me a resume, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I was like, where'd you come from? And her background though is it's just crazy, because there's no way I would have even found her if I would have even looked or known even what to look for. But when she started to tell me about her background, she helped a guy build a mortgage company from the ground up into 15 branches in 3 different states over 14 years. And she was like operations, compliance, hire, fire, managing the whole show. And then she wanted to help me. I'm sitting there going, holy smokes, you just totally blew everybody out of the water. You just became candidate number 1. And I'm sitting there going, is this going to be okay with Molly? I'm sitting there worried about Molly when I'm sitting there going, man, this is something I'm looking for, but at the same time, it's kind of like their show, their program. They were trying to, hunt me down an operator, but I was like, well, she's in Top Tier TC, so she kind of fits that requirement. So I called up Molly and I told her about it. And I'm like, I need you to take a peek at this. She's like, I said, we need to have a meeting with her. And so we had a meeting with her, a Zoom, and her and Ashley and Molly. And I mean, her and Molly just hit it off.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yep.
Right away. You could tell they were on the same page as far as mindset and operations and, delegation, how they run the show. And after the call, Molly and Ashley were like, oh my gosh, she's great. She's amazing for this, and I'm like, awesome. I'm glad you guys feel that way. Cause I said, I didn't know what to do, because I wasn't too overly excited about the other candidates. They're great people, but at the same time, when I come to think about an operations person, you're bringing somebody into your life. So there's a lot of things that have to fit. First of all, they got to be able to do their job, and they got to be able to have the experience that's going to benefit you. And Bree she said, she had personally transacted over 500 deals herself as well. And this is before Top Tier TC. Yes, it was in traditional lending, but what we are doing is completely non-traditional, and good luck finding somebody that has all that kind of experience. I mean, my word. That was a tough one for me, because I had to make some hard decisions. And, she was in a W-2 making solid income, and I had to replace that W-2 in order for her to come on board. That was tough. I've never hired anybody, let alone somebody at that figure, and I'm like, holy cow, it was stressing me out. It was stressing me out bad, because I was like, oh my gosh, I pretty much am going to be responsible for feeding this family. I mean, that's a lot of responsibility, and I didn't want to let anybody down. And so I was him-hawing back and forth, and she could feel it, and she could tell, because I would have intermittent meetings with her and her husband, and they were getting a little concerned about it. And I just about lost her because of it, because she was like, well, we're not, we need something more certain. And they could just tell how bad I was stressing about it. And then I had somebody slap me upside the head. They're like, well, what's that going to take per month to make that happen? And so I reverse engineered the whole thing and realized how much I would need to come up with per month to cover that. And that reduced my stress because I was like, oh, well, that makes it so much easier, because I'm like, that shouldn't be a problem at all. And for the value she was about to bring, for what I had to come up with extra per month, it was like, oh my gosh, this is a no-brainer. And I mean, I was trying to get back in touch with her. I was like, oh my gosh, because we had a meeting coming up, and I had to do a little sweet talking, and I don't know. It was that whole FOMO kicked in, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't lose her. Because then what I started thinking about, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I don't make this happen, the worst thing that could happen is I would find out who she went to work for, and then to watch what happened with that business, and I didn't want that. I didn't want to see that. And, cause I knew whoever she went to work with or work for was just going to be tremendously beneficial for them, and good luck finding somebody of that caliber. So I bit the bullet, and she started January 29th, I believe. And we've just been building and scaling since, and Pace brought us on a Zoom about 60 days later to find out how things were going. And he had generalized information about her, but didn't really realize how much experience she had, I think. And so it was kind of fun because he brought us on this family night thing, and I think we were on there for like an hour and a half. But when he found out about her experience level, he was like, oh my gosh. He's like, this is crazy. He's like, if it doesn't work out with Chris, let me know. He said, I'll hire you today. I'm like, oh my God. Like, dude, hands off, man. Because really, good luck finding somebody, with that type of work experience. But I'm so super excited because we get along so great. Her husband and I get along great. She gets me because I'm apparently so similar to how her husband is with ADHD and OCD and, the distractibility. And she knows how to keep me in check and how to cut me off. And she can anticipate what I'm going to do or not do. So she's like, hey, she gets it right in front of my face. So I take care of it. And that's stuff that I need, and so it's been a great symbiotic relationship, and I love it, and I'm excited where it's going to go. I've had to slow things down so we can make sure we're, operating more securely, doing things with a little bit more brain power behind them. I know a lot more than I did. I know a lot better how to protect people. So we've built a completely different security structure, which I feel is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, in the Gator community. And that's kind of my goal. I want to have the strongest security structure in the Gator community because I'm tired of people getting into bad situations because of either bad borrowers or just a deal that goes south out of somebody's control. But when you're in a lien position, it's so hard because you can't do anything about it. You have to just sit and wait and see what happens, see what transpires, and hope for the best. And that sucks. I don't like that. So now with the security structure we have right now, we can actually take action if something starts to go south, and we can protect our money. And so far, so good, right? Because we've been doing a lot of consulting with PML attorneys, securities attorneys, real estate attorneys, trying to gain as much knowledge as we can about this space and trying to make sure we maintain compliance, that we're not breaking any laws, breaking any state regulations, so we don't get ourselves into trouble, and so we don't get our people into trouble that come and do the deals through us, that participate in deals through us. And it's been great so far moving forward with this. But the things that I have, the deals that we're still yet to close, I just can't wait for all that stuff to be behind us so we can just, have this fresh, clean sheet of paper to work with, and then just to get stronger and stronger from there. And some of the situations we had been in, there's been some deals that have not gone definitely the way we would want them to. And some of it's been the borrower's fault. Some of it's been a TC's fault. Some of it's been, I want to say a combination of my fault and the JV partner's fault, right? And the reason I say that is for us not having the knowledge that we probably should have had before we jumped into the deal, because we did our vetting and our underwriting, to what we knew. And this is even dealing with things with appraisals. And if we would have known certain little things or certain little aspects of the deal, we probably wouldn't have participated, and that's why I personally lost money doing this, and why other people in bad situations do as well, because they get excited about deals. They jump into things after they thought they've, got enough information to, oh yeah, this is a good deal, even though everything we do is high risk. But then to find out later on,
it's high risk, but it's also high reward.
After the fact, it's like that hindsight's a bitch. I mean, it just comes up and bites you in the butt, and you can't do anything about it, And so
Well, you can now.
What's that?
You can now.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I've changed things, so we can actually do something about it. And I'm always looking for, and I don't care who it is, right? If somebody has a suggestion or they have something better they want to tell me about, I'm all ears open, because I want to. And if I find anything else stronger that I can plug into the structure we have currently, man, I'm putting it in there. Because I don't care how complex it gets, as long as we can keep people protected in there. That's my goal. I want to keep mainly the JV partners protected, but at the same time, I'm trying to be fair for the borrower as well, because these borrowers, they're investors just like us. They're trying to make it in the space. There's a ton of people that things might go awry, but it's not with ill intent. It's the majority of the times it seems like it happens due to lack of education.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, because they either got into a bad deal or they just missed one little facet of their deal or their structure. They're like, damn, I didn't think about that until after the fact. And that's like, well, it's too late now. So now everybody has to go down with that ship, unfortunately. But it's just not fun having the stress. And so if we can reduce the amount of stress, reduce the amount of risk as much as possible, you can't get rid of it all by any means. But the more and more you reduce it, the more comfortability you bring into a deal, and, try and put people in a better way. I want to see everybody succeed. And so the way we have it built is very fair to the borrower. It's very fair to our JV partners. It brings a lot of cohesiveness together, and it forces communication, which is great.
So I want to back up the ship just a little bit, Chris. So I'm right on the same page as you, and I know exactly what you're talking about, but some people that are listening might not completely understand what it is that is your business. I was wondering if you could just take a moment and explain it imagine you're explaining it to a fifth grader. What is it that Prima Fund actually does?
Well, maybe I should bring it up to a freshman in high school. Yes. Well, okay. So our main product that we're working on right now, granted, it's not going to be the extent of what we do, but currently we are trying to keep the mindset of mastering one product, getting that delegated and operational to a point of it being as hands-off as we can possibly be, and then moving on to a different product. So we're just trying to master one thing, and then once we have that going exactly where we want it, now we're going to shift to another product as well, and we'll just continue to build from there. So right now, the main product that we're working on is, the majority of the time, is gap lending, if you will. Even though we're not lending, we're JVing with people. So we come in as JV partnerships with borrowers that need their cash to close, or their additional rehab money. Or maybe they need the whole thing. Maybe they need the acquisition, construction cost, the cash to close all together, 100% financing. If the deal makes sense, as far as if the equity position is there that we require, and if the borrower has the experience level that we require, and everything else looks good, yeah, we might get into it at that point. Because the security structure that we have it the way it is, if we need to act to basically take over the project and or take over ownership of the asset, then that's what we've built in, and we're anticipating that's going to work, seamlessly. But of course, that's all. Anything you do in the space all depends on how the right attorney looks at it and how a judge looks at it at the end of the day, right? If something were to go down, so you kind of have to take it
interpreted however they want.
Exactly, and that's why nothing's bulletproof, but all we're trying to do is get as close as we can. So we're trying to we're like a Tesla Cybertruck right now. we can withstand the 9mm and the smaller calibers, but you open up on it with a 308 or something, I'm not sure if it's going to withstand a puncture.
I'm a 50 cal kind of guy.
We don't know. We don't know until we get in the guts of it, you know. So that's the main thing we're supplying right now is partnerships on cash to close and gap funding, additional money that people need to get a deal closed. If they have, per se, the typical deal, somebody usually comes to us after they've qualified for a hard money loan, which is generally going to cover their acquisition and their construction cost, but up to 70, 75, 80% loan to value. And they're generally going off of an ARV that's established through an appraisal, an ARV appraisal. 100% of the deals we do right now are dealing with an appraisal. We're done guesswork. We're done with just going off of CMAs. It's like, if you don't have an appraisal, you need to get one. Mm-hmm. And once they have that appraisal, which are generally conservative when it comes to an ARV appraisal, and they're going to be more conservative than not anyway. So that way, if the market does treat you better at the end of the deal, and once you appraise it for, let's say if you're going to do a DSCR on the back end, you're going to hold it. And if you're going to refinance it and cash out, they're going to have to do another appraisal. And so you're hoping that number is going to be, of course, as close to that DSCR appraisal as possible. But if it's not, the amount of potential equity position that they need to have in the deal at the end of the deal, it needs to make sense. So we require them to have at least a minimum of 20% potential equity above the entire capital stack. And what I mean by capital stack for the fifth grader is, no, I shouldn't say that. This is something I had to learn too, right? You got to learn a lot of verbiage in this thing, in this space. So your capital stack is going to be your hard money, the cost of their fees, the cost of all their junk fees, whatever comes on top of that, and then the cost of the money we bring into the deal, our fees, the taxes, the insurance, closing costs, potentially whatever the realtor might be getting paid on the back end if they do dispo it through a realtor. So we have to take all those costs into account. We stack all that money up. We weigh it against the ARV appraisal, and there's got to be at least a 20% position, or as far as buffer between those two numbers. And if they have that, well, regardless of what that number is, that determines how much we can come into the deal with. And we always maintain that threshold. And then when it comes to the borrower, we require them to at least have one HUD with callable references. And so we will call every reference that's involved with that deal, hard money, agent, escrow officer, anybody that has something to do with the deal, the contractor. And if we hear any type of red flag situation, it's like, ooh, I don't like that. That's not worth the risk. Sorry, dude, come back when you have some more experience, because we're not going to go ahead and let you gain experience on us. It's just not worth it for us. We don't want the headaches. We don't want the headaches. We don't want people to be at that high of a risk. But the borrowers that we're targeting borrowers right now that do 10, 15, 20, 30 deals a year. You know, we're looking for that career flipper, that career investor, if you will. This is what they do on a day-to-day. This isn't their side gig that they're trying to fit in after their W-2. So we're going.
They understand the leverage that we're bringing to the table.
Exactly, and that's where our sell point is. Because now we're dealing with some people that, you know, it's like, oh, well, 10 a year is all as I can get done because that's all the capital I have to cover, you know, my cash to close and my EMDs and all these other expenses. You know, it's like, well, hey, what if you found, instead of finding a 70-30 deal, why don't you find a 60-40 deal, leverage our money that we can bring in, and now instead of 10 deals a year, now maybe you can double that, you know? So the concept totally makes sense to them. The security structure that I bring them on board with totally makes sense to them. We haven't had too much pushback at all about it, and any type of concerns that we have, we address them pretty quickly. And it makes sense. It makes sense to them. So, and they realize how fair it is because of the risk involved. But that's kind of where we're going. What am I missing here that you want to? I might have missed something.
That was it. I was looking for you to talk about how, you know, you're doing gap funding and essentially what that is, because we were kind of getting a little bit into the weeds. And again, I was 100%. I was 100% on board with where you're going, but some people may not understand even what that is. We were kind of talking at a little bit of a high level, so I wanted to bring it back. Couple of things that you had said that were also a little bit high level is like things like MAO. I wrote down here. That's max allowable offer for people that don't know. You were talking about way back about property management companies, and you touched on something that's really important. And it's like, you got to make sure you get the right property management company if that's something you're doing, because a lot of them will screw you.
They would rob me like striped hamburger thief.
They will take you for everything that you got. They won't give you the information that you need. They'll charge you $300 to change a light bulb, and it gets crazy. Going back to Bree, I'll tell you, brother, I saw an immediate change in your business. So as soon as she came on board, like things were happening like that. Like the stuff that I'm looking at in the back end on your business and everything that you've got going on, including social media and like anything that I could see with my eyeballs, I could tell that she was getting into it and just optimizing everything. And you've got a freaking rock star. Absolutely. And I would be scared too. So the first thing I would have thought if I were you was like, damn, she is a rock star. How the hell do I afford her? You know what I mean? I can't pay her enough.
I know what you mean. It's been a blessing. It's been a blessing. So
yeah, she's doing an amazing thing. And I just looked at some PDFs that she had put together, and man, that stuff looks so amazing. It's like highly professional. Just the graphics on it and everything are just perfect, and she's got that touch. She's definitely good for you.
it's funny. We have a talk once in a while. I'm like, this is crazy. It's like this is a company and stuff. You know, because I don't know. It's just weird, right? It's kind of surreal in a way, because it's like, wow, this is serious. You know, I mean, it's we're trying to scale, we're trying to make a presence, trying to get a brand out there, and trying to provide a service. You know, but even though it's a risky business, you know, if it's done, you know, with the proper intent and you know, as far as trying to take care of people the best you can, that's where the majority of it's got to come from. You know, granted, you know, we're responsible for a certain amount of things. They're responsible for a certain amount of things, but it's just a matter of everybody understanding what their position and what their place is in the, you know, in the relationship, if you will. Because they're really, you think about a certain situation like this, where people come in and investing through us with a borrower. We don't touch their money. We don't, you know, we don't make the decision for them. I mean, I tell anybody and everybody that comes to do business through us, I'm like, please, you need to be 100% comfortable with this deal. Ask every question you need to get answered. If you need to get the borrower on the phone, every one of those borrowers knows that if I need to bring them on a Zoom so you can ask them face to face, they're going to make themselves available. Because that's part of the stipulation of having to do the deal with them. You know, I'm like, listen, you have to make yourself available. Because we're in such a virtual world right now, and so many scams going on. We don't know, you know, what's real and what's not. And so if I have to do the virtual belly bump, if you will, now we're getting belly to belly to talk and face to face. And if that's as close as it can get, it's better than not. You know what I mean? So I want to provide that comfortability level. And that's why the majority of the time I'm trying to interview our borrowers. And I've been getting a lot of positive feedback from that, because I've been trying to approach everything from what would I want? You know, if I got myself in a deal, what would I want to see? And that's part of it. It's like, man, I want to know who the hell I'm, you know, coming into business with. And so that's why I've been trying to bring a borrower on. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your experience. You know, why should we come and do business with you? Cool. Tell me about the deal. Why is this a good deal? Why do you think we should invest our money with you? You know, and take 5 to 10 minutes to do that with them on a Zoom, you know, and I throw it out there so people can take a look at that and see what, make their determination from that point. Maybe they don't like the way the guy looks and they're like, oh, I don't want to do business with this clown, you know, or maybe it's just that one little tipping factor. It's like, wow, I was thinking this way, but now that he got on there and I can get a better idea of what he's all about, I'm in. And I've had to go both ways. Great. I want people to get every bit of information they can, because if they are not comfortable at all, and they're not ready to take on this risk, their risk tolerance isn't there, please don't do it. do yourself a favor, do me a favor, don't do it. Because that's the last thing I want somebody to do is get involved in a situation where a month later they're going, oh my gosh, what did I do? I can't take the stress. If you think you're going to have that stress and you think you're going to be uncomfortable at that point, just don't do it. Just don't do it until you're ready. Everybody's risk tolerance is different.
So, Chris, I'm curious, have you had any that you've had to take the project back and finish it yet?
Not yet. But we have one situation that we're close on. I think they're being very nice and they're being very lenient. And I've given them option to what they would like to do. But and just so people understand, I guess the way we have this set up is every deal that we do now, we are coming into the borrower's LLC at a total of 51% voting rights and full membership. And we have a pretty detailed list of if you do this, or if this happens, or if you do that, this can initiate our voting powers. And so it's pretty strict. And if we think of more things, we're going to put them in there because I want to hold the borrower to the fire because they have, these people's money and they need, and I illustrate to them every time. I'm like, listen, you're not dealing with a hedge fund. You're dealing with people's retirement, with people's families' money. This is food on their family's table. You need to take that seriously. And so that's why we have such strict guidelines right now that if you screw up, there's a chance you might just not be in charge of this project any further, and we'll take it from here. So when it comes to that deal that I was talking about, this gal had made some promises up front. She agreed with the whole structure. But some of these, one of these promises she made, she was like, oh, every subcontractor that's going to work on this house is going to be licensed, be a licensed contractor, and everything's going to be solid. What she failed to tell us is that every day after work, she was going to be going to the house and trying to do as much as she possibly could to try and save herself money from what these contractors were going to have to be doing. And that's held up the deal. And that's caused some things to have to be redone. And so we had to have a coming to Jesus moment with her and be like, hey, you promised that everybody was going to be a licensed contractor. Are you a licensed contractor? Oh, you're not. Okay, well, listen, this is the way things are going to happen. Luckily for her, the borrower or the JV partners that came into the deal, they're being pretty lenient. They appreciated me being a good cop, bad cop as far as when it came to the situation, because they didn't want to have to come down on her, because it's like, yeah, we just want you to get the project done and get us our money back. But at the same time, I'm going to bat for them. And, I chewed her out a little bit. I mean, it was constructive, but it was kind of funny because I don't know. I felt bad to a certain extent, but then again, I didn't, I guess, because they came back to her, she went back to one of them afterwards, and she's like, I haven't been chewed out like that since the 5th grade from Mrs. Killer Miller. I'm like,
The deputy chief just chewed my ass out.
well, I'm glad I brought that back to memory.
And that leads me to my next question, though, is like, in an event where that does happen, who is actually responsible? I know everyone's got their own set of responsibilities within these deals. So who is responsible for, contacting a new GC if they need to, and basically making sure that everything is getting done when it wasn't? So
are you saying if they had to take over?
Right. So who's working the project after that fact if you're kicking out the borrower?
Then now at that point, and that's one thing. The way this is set up is the borrower has 49%, and then we come in at 49%, but then my company comes in, whether I'm contributing or not, I come in with 2 extra percent. And so if I'm not contributing into the deal, I come in still as a JV partner at 2%. So that way I can balance out the vote, if you will. Mm-hmm. Main reason being is because I'm doing this for the borrower's sake also, so they don't feel like the JV partners can just come in and at the drop of a hat, they can raise the pitchforks, and take voting power on them and vote them out of the project, or vote them out of the manager position. So if it's something that's completely out of the borrower's control, I understand that. I want to be a mediator in this situation. It's like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's see where we're at, and let's come up with a resolution that makes sense. However, if the borrower just did something that completely, as a jackass, it's like, well, sorry, man, you had your opportunity, but now you're really putting our money at risk. We're going to have to go ahead and vote you out as manager. We're going to appoint a new manager and take over the project from here, and decide what the outcome is going to be. So from that point, yes, the JV partners in the deal are going to have to take the reins and make some decisions on what to do, whether, of course, granted, whatever the situation is. Let's say it was a different contractor. The cool thing about our community is we have sub 2 and Gator students nationwide, everywhere. And if we need to find a fix for a certain problem, it's all but a few posts and a couple of phone calls, and I think that problem is going to be solved. So any given
the beauty of the beauty of our community. Absolutely.
That part makes it priceless because your resources are like instantaneous. You know what I mean? And so that part I'm not too worried about because everybody is supposed to have a go-giver attitude. Not everybody does, but the majority of us do. But because of that, people want to help people succeed, And so if somebody comes to the Facebook group with an issue, they're like, oh, well, I know a guy here, or you can get a hold of this other individual in the community, and they have a fix for this or whatever. But you're going to find your answers, and you're going to get the help that you need to see success because nobody wants to see anybody go down, And so that because of that, I'm not too overly concerned about that. I know we're going to be able to get find the solutions that we need. You know what I mean?
Cool. So we're almost up to an hour now, brother, and I know you've got another call coming up, but I just got a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you. I alluded to before we jumped on the call is first of all, who would you say is your biggest influence that has brought you to where you're at right now, whether it be a mentor or an influencer like Pace maybe, or whoever it may be? Who would you say has helped attribute to your current success?
And man, I mean, if we had to go all the way back, I would say probably Robert Kiyosaki, I guess. I mean, because and the main reason I say that is because of Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's
see that right there.
Oh,
that's his book right there.
Okay, I got you. So obviously an influence in your situation as well. But that applied to my upbringing so much from my dad being a teacher for 30 years and having the baby boomer mindset. It just really applied to my life, and that really turned on that initial light bulb. That was like, oh my gosh, why didn't this book come out like 20 years earlier? Because I definitely wouldn't have been teaching that long, or probably for that matter, possibly not even going to college, maybe just go for the education. But the whole point was I would have got into this space a lot sooner. But
I would have as well.
But my biggest positive influencer right now is by far been Pace, just because of his attitude of gratitude, his go-giver attitude, always wanting to help people, just a great guy. I mean, he's great in person. He's always hoping for the best for people. He gives way more value than any other per se guru in the space, but just a good guy, just down to earth, real guy. So yeah, I love it.
All right. So I know that Rich Dad Poor Dad was obviously a big influence. Give me 2 other books that you feel as though have helped pave the way for you.
I would, wow. Well, gosh, I hate to be cliche, but Think and Go Rich really puts a lot into your head about when it comes with all those different scenarios. Oh, you got it up. Yeah. Well, it's such a go-to. That's such a valuable book. I don't think you can hear that book enough. One thing I've noticed about that book that applies is it brings up so many different scenarios for different parts of your business journey, you know what I mean? Or your investment journey, if you will. Because there's things I heard before that didn't really matter. But now if I go back and listen to it again, there's things that I'm like, oh, that applies today. You know what I mean? So I get that part. And then I will say, gosh, another one that really drove me, and I could say it both ways, and it would be old Mr. Grant Cardone with the 10X rule and be obsessed or be average. That was what kind of kicked my butt into gear. I'm like, yeah, I got to just get in the weeds. That be obsessed or be average, or that title right there, it was just like, you just got to go for it. You just got to dive deep and hold tight, and then when it comes to the 10X rule, yeah, why am I setting goals so low? I need to just set it up and above. And it's like, man, even if I get halfway there, it's not a disappointment, bummer I didn't get to that point, but it's like, holy cow, look where I'm at now. And so that's been my attitude through the whole thing. And that's why I'm just grind.
You've got to grind.
And I've got a goal right now of hitting 50, 60 deals a month. And, I want to hit 500,000 net per month. And we're on our way to doing that. I just had to slow things down a little bit so I could build the infrastructure that I need to make that happen, that I didn't realize that I needed. And so now that I realize exactly what I need, I didn't realize how much time it takes and, just the planning it takes to structure that. So that's why I'm so grateful to have Bree in place right now. So now I have an operator, I have a post-close coordinator, we have 3 TCs at the ready, I have a VA, we're getting ready to hire another VA. So we're, our team's building out right now. And then I'm looking at any type of AI I can. So.
And that's the perfect segue into my next question and my final question, because I know you got to go, is what is it that you currently need in your business that somebody might be able to help you out with?
Invest.
Well, the main thing we're looking for right now, somebody does have the money, they're looking for an investment, but they don't know where the deals are. And I'm willing to teach anybody about that because I want to see people have success in our community. I know how it is to get involved into a program, not find success. And if you don't find success for a certain amount of time, you're going to be looking for something else, a different direction. And so I want to be able to help people not be in that situation. I want them to find success as soon as possible.
I was really thinking about gatekeeping you because you are such an amazing guy and you have a crazy business going on that is highly profitable. And I see the value in it.
Is it awesome?
It's pretty awesome.
But
all right,
no,
Chris,
definitely
it's been a pleasure. I think we're a little bit over, actually. I know you had another call coming up, so I just wanted to say I appreciate you coming on and providing all the value that you did. It's been a pleasure, and thank you so much.
Appreciate you, Jonathan, so much. Thanks again.
All right, guys. That's the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching the whole thing. It really helps boost the algorithm, and it helps us get out to more people. If you'd like to learn more about getting into a partnership with Chris and I and making 30 to 40% typically annualized on your money, then go ahead and schedule some time on my calendar. I put the link in the description below. Most of these gap funding deals last 4 to 6 months, but we typically like to say 6 months just to make sure that everyone's happy, because of course it's always better to get paid early than it is to get paid late. On the other side of that is there are late fees, so it may not even be a bad thing to get paid late necessarily. Anyway, that's all I have for you this time. I'll see you on the next leg of the journey.